Hi everyone, so I decided to have an experiment again. I haven't used my 3D pen for absolutely ages. I don't know when I last actually posted a video about doing stuff with the 3D pen. So I decided to have a play and see what I could come up with. What I decided to do first of all was to do a version of my Ned character. Trying to get him as 3D as possible, and what I wanted to do today, my goal was to try and get the sculpt as smooth as possible. Now obviously at this stage it's not going to be smooth because I'm just drawing it out, but I'll show you in a bit what I did to make it nice and smooth, well, as smooth as I could get it. So first of all, I did the basic outline of Ned's head and then filled it in, and then it was a case of building up multiple layers on top to create the 3D effect. So as you can see, I'm forming like a wall around the edge and then filling it in to make sure it's nice and rigid, and then building up from there. This is what I found was the easiest way of building up the head, and obviously by building up those layers, it means as the more layers you use, the more 3D it will be. So here you can see I'm building up those layers to build up the face of the Ned sculpture that I'm making. I used those little zigzags as support for the middle section because it was starting to sag. You do need to make sure you do zigzags across the space every so often to give it a bit more support when you're making it, but once it's set, it's all nice and solid and really firm. And there was a bit of a sort of indentation at the front, a bit that was sunk down, so I just filled that in. Then I went over the edges in a different direction. Again, I'm just trying to fill in any gaps at this stage. I'm not too worried about it being perfectly neat, but the main idea is to fill up as many gaps as I can, and the more layers I've got, the more rigid and stronger this sculpture will be. So at this stage I was fairly happy with it, and the shape, it's starting to take shape. It's starting to be the shape of a head, more specifically Ned's head. I do kind of wish I'd done him in a bluey colour, although I haven't quite got the colour that I would need, but I just used this fleshy tone because it was one I wanted to use up. Then what I did is I took my pyrography tool, it's like a sort of what you call it, soldering iron with different attachments on, so you can actually like draw by burning into wood. And what I did is I waited for that to heat up a little bit and used the flattest tool I'd got and used that to smooth down the plastic. Because it's hot, you rub it over the plastic, and it is like a sort of thermoplastic, this stuff, and I found it smooths it out. Now be warned, this does smell, and obviously this is not, you know, this is you got to be careful you don't burn your hands or anything, but make sure you've got a really well ventilated area, you know, got your windows open and everything. I recommend a respirator because it does really stink, because after a bit, as the pyrography iron thing gets too hot, it does start to actually smoke a tiny little bit, so you do have to be careful. I found what I had to do was just use it for a bit, turn it off and let it cool down a second, and then use it again. I kind of wish I'd got one that had got a bit more control over the temperature, but this was just a bog standard one I got in a kit years ago. I will do some videos on pyrography at some point, but it's one where I have to do it in warm weather because I have to have all the windows open, because obviously the smell of burning wood would fill my art studio otherwise, and that's not good for my chest. And also I need a respirator, like a new respirator sort thing, so I won't do that just yet, but I will at some point and show you. But as you can see, you just press into the wood and it creates the picture or the words. That's just a bit of really cheap sort of balsa wood stuff, which is really soft, which is why it doesn't work as well. You can get a lot more subtle shading and fainter lines if you use a hardwood, but again, I'll show you that in a future tutorial. So what I did is smoothed all over Ned's head as much as I could, and then used a nail file to sand down any little sharp lumps and bumps. There wasn't any, So I just used the nail file just to go over it a little bit, just to improve the smoothness as much as I could. I am going to practice with this technique because I've seen some people that have done this and they get really smooth sculptures, like it actually looks very, very smooth, almost to the point like factory quality, you know, when something's made in a factory. But obviously I'm learning how to do that, so I haven't got there yet. The only annoying thing I found is obviously when I was smoothing down the plastic, the 3D pen cooled down, so I had to wait for it to warm back up, which is annoying. Then I worked on his nose, just created 3 circles at the bottom and then the stick for the middle of the nose, and then it's just a case of using the heat of the pen to smooth that all out. And what I tend to do is I'll put the plastic down and very quickly press it into place, and then obviously if the tool that I'm using is warmed up, that would help to smooth down the nose as well. So his nose was a bit lumpy at this stage, but I did smooth it down a little bit more later on. And then it was a case of changing the colour in the gun so I could draw the eyes. I found they stuck really well, but I found the pupils pinged off and I did have to redo those, but never mind. I think it's just size wise. I think like the more surface area the plastic's attached to, the better the hold. So I created 2 big eyes, and I did my standard one eye bigger than the other, which I like to do on all my characters. I don't know why, it's just a stylistic choice. I just think it looks kind of fun and a bit different. So I like to do that. And what I do is I'll put the plastic on and then give it a second to cool, and then press with my fingers just to smooth it down as much as possible. And I find that gives me a much smoother effect. It's like, it sort of makes sure it's well in contact with the surface of the face so it sticks. Then once I've done the teeth, then came the tricky part of doing the outlines on the teeth and the eyes, and this was a pain. I did find that when I obviously tried to just put it on, it created a nice big thick blob, so it looked like he got a moustache, but never mind. What I did find, one little tip, is I found that once the gun's been on for a bit, if I leave it, like turn it off and leave it, I found out like a little bit of the plastic seeps out the end. So what I actually managed to do for the fine detail is just use what was naturally oozing out as the pen cooled. That way I could get much thinner lines instead of big, thick, squishy lines. So I will try that technique a bit more to see how much detail I can get. I want to try and get finer detail with this. But for a first real proper go of trying to get a smooth sculpture, it's not too bad. Here I'm using that technique where I'm waiting for the plastic to just ooze out the end of the gun after I've turned the gun off. And as you can see, it's a lot thinner line. It's a lot more, I can get a more detailed line. And then as you can see, when the machine's on, it just all oozes out and just makes a mess. So I do like this technique of just letting the gun as it's cooling down just ooze, and then using that to create the outlines. It gives me a lot thinner effect. Here I got to the annoying stage where like it seems so, it's like you've got hairs all over it. It's like really thin, wispy bits of plastic, and then every so often they all attach to each other. So every time you move the sculpture, like half a dozen bits come with you. So I did have to stop for a second just to remove those. Then I put the pupils on of the eyes and did those the same size. Sometimes I do them larger than the other, sometimes I do them the same size, and gave him some little eyebrows, make him look a bit quizzical and a bit sort of like, huh? There you can see I've got all the little bits that were stuck, and I had to just use some scissors just to snip that end off, because sometimes the plastic forms these really sort of fine hairs, and it's just like spider webs, it just sticks to everything. And then once I got to this stage, it was a case of building up the neck a little bit, because then I decided that I was going to make it so it could stand up on my desk. So what I'm doing is building up the back of the neck first, and then I build up the front part of the neck, and this is going to give me something to stick the cape on and not the top of his outfit. And also it just helps me form something that will make the head stand upright when it's attached to the base. And I just applied about 2 or 3 layers until I was happy with the thickness and that it matched Ned, matched his head. And then it was a case of, as you can see, the one pupil pinged off as I did that, so I did have to put the black filament back in and redo the pupil of the one eye. So you'll see me doing that in a second. The only other thing as well is you have to, like when you've put your colour in, if there's been another colour you've used, you do have to wait a second for that colour to sort of ooze out the gun before you actually get the colour you wanted. So at this stage I decided to get my purple out and use that for his outfit. Now I know I normally draw Ned with a black outfit, but I decided for this one to use the purple. I haven't got very much black left, and I hadn't used any of the purple, and purple's like my favourite colour, so I thought I'll give him a purple outfit instead. So what I'm using here is the Ned sticker I made as a general outline, and then just filling that in. And then it's just a case of building that up so it's more 3D. So I'll go around the edges first of all, and as you can see I'll just very gently press them down with my finger just to make sure it's all stuck in place. And then it's just a case of building up the layers after that. So as you can see now I'm starting to make it so it goes above the neck, so it goes over the neck. I did later on smooth everything down a little bit as well, but I'm not sure if I've got all the footage of that. And I did put like a stand at the back of it that I made using the 3D pen so it could stand up on my desk. But again, I don't think I filmed that bit. I think that's something I did later on, because originally I was going to leave it like this, where it was sort of half 3D, half not. But I'll just show you what I've got anyway, whatever footage I've got that comes out in this video. So as you can see here, I'm building up the layers of his jacket. I always do Ned with a high collared long sort of coat or jacket on, and then I'm building up the layers at the back so it's a bit more 3D at the back and not so flat, even though I didn't do that on the head strangely enough for some reason. I think I decided after a point that it was like I was using a load of filament, and it wasn't really necessary because I'm only going to look at this from the front. But I build up the layers at the back just to make sure the adhesion between the top and the neck of Ned was nice and strong, and then filled in any gaps that looked a bit weird. And then I decided his collar needed to come ever so slightly higher up along his neck, so I just filled that in with a few layers of plastic as well. And I think it was at this point that I realised that the pupil had pinged off his eye. So I changed the colour to black so I can repair his eye. And I found the other one was coming off as well, so I redid that. I found if you get the glue gun, if you get the 3D pen nice and hot before trying to actually, like, you know, make an image with it or make a creation with it, I find that the plastic melts a little bit more, so it sticks a lot better, even though it's only a small amount for the pupils of his eyes. Here a couple of times I went over the outline for his teeth using that method where I'm just letting the pen ooze as it's cooling down and using that to create the mouth. I did mess up the mouth a little bit, but that's okay, because I mean this is a first go at creating Ned. I've done like a very basic little character before, and then I did that one where it was like Danny the Demon with armour on, which turned out quite well. But there wasn't that much detail in these, whereas this one has got the outlines on his features on his face, like on outline on his teeth and on his eyes. So obviously there was a bit more sort of more intricate finer lines to try and get with this. So I do need to practice with this to see if I can get those lines nice and thin. I am getting there, but it's just going to take a bit of practice, and unfortunately I couldn't get that top bit of his mouth off, otherwise I would have completely redone it, but never mind. I think what I'll do later on is just go over it again. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.